Hey everyone, welcome to my very first chess video. Most of my chess games have been on this app called SocialChess on iPhone and iPad. It's a really good way to play online. But anyway, this is a game against a chess player that I really have developed a lot of respect for. He's a lot better than me. I've played him about 50 times. He's beat me probably about 40 of those. But this was just a particular game where I feel like I really fought hard and saw some good openings and ended up winning the game. Anyway, I kind of want to talk through my strategy a little bit. So back during this game was when kind of my preferred opening strategy was King's Pawns game. So you see, I'm white, so I go first. So I'll just kind of replay through this game here. So my first move was e2 to e4, so the king's pawn getting right into the center 4 squares there. And then he goes e7 to e6. And then I'm using kind of a more aggressive strategy here. I'm trying to forward my my pawns down the center of the board there. He counters me by trying to go around that pawn, and then I counter him by playing the queen's pawn to protect my king's pawn. And so at least this player, his strategy's evolved a little bit since then, but back a few years ago when I played this game, it seemed like kind of his big objective was to kind of use his pawns to kind of plug up the board and kind of shut down my progress with my pawns. And then it just made it very kind of difficult to execute any real significant mid-game strategies. And it kind of left me with not a whole lot of options. So you see as kind of the game progresses, it was always kind of annoying because I feel like, for the first several games I played him, I kind of knew exactly what he was doing, but I just had a very hard time stopping it. So you see that he's kind of, using his pawns and his knight to really just kind of set up this roadblock for all of my pawns. And we see kind of as the game progresses. So there, he's he kind of has all of his pawns in like this kind of diagonal fashion where he's blocking all my pawns. And again, it really kind of makes it difficult to execute a strong mid-game strategy. So anyway, you can kind of see as the game progresses here, I start to kind of realize that he's kind of blocking me on this entire left side of the board here. So I decide I'm going to try to focus my my offense to kind of the right side of the board. And so you see on this last move, I move my queen out here to g4. And so so he responds by castling, which I feel like in this situation was kind of a mistake, because then it puts his king kind of right over on the right side of the board, where I'm now focusing my offense, and where he's a little bit weaker. I feel like it maybe would have been a more useful strategy to have castled the other way, so to castle with the queen's rook instead of the king's rook. But anyway, so he castles there. I then start to try to castle as well, which, looking back, I don't know that was the best idea either. It might have been stronger to have gotten some of these pawns out, here to challenge his pawns protecting his king. But I countered by castling. That's just the decision I made in this situation here. So again, he is now kind of trying to strengthen his defense on this right side of the board in response to my attacking him there. And then I again, realized a little bit too late that I can kind of use my king's pawns here to try to challenge his king's pawns. Again, it might have been a little bit more effective had I not castled here. But anyway, so he puts pressure on my queen there, so I make my queen retreat a little bit. And now I'm aiming at this, this H column right here to try to get access to the king on that side around the right there. So anyway, you see kind of as the game progresses. And again, he goes after my knight there, which I think might have been kind of a mistake, because then that opens this this H column to me here. And then, you know, he reinforces that pawn there on the F column. And then, so at some point I realized that I want to get my rooks over on this side of my king so I can reinforce this spot right there. Because at this point, that's kind of this is a weak point for him, because that's, you know, unprotected by any other piece other than the king. So you'll see that kind of for the next little part of the game here, my strategy is to try to get these rooks over on this side, over on the right side of my king. So you'll notice that, okay, so now I move my king kind of up, forward and diagonal to F2 to allow my rooks room to move to reinforce my queen. Then he takes my pawn, puts pressure on my queen. I take his pawn. He puts pressure on my queen again. And so I go right back to that black square where I am out of the reach of that bishop there. And then he moves his queen there to reinforce that weak spot right there. But at this point, I'm also able to reinforce my queen down this H column here. So, and again, my next several moves are going to be just trying to reinforce this column as much as I can. And then he reinforces that spot as well. So anyway, you see me trying to stack my rooks and my queen. He keeps on, right now I'm just focused on that square right there, trying to get as many pieces aimed at that square as I can. So right now you see I've developed this queen stacked with my two rooks, which is a, you know, pretty powerful, you know, strong position, obviously, all against that one spot there. And right now I don't have I don't, you know, have the firepower, obviously, to take that spot there. You know, I'd move there, he'd take my queen, I'd take his queen, he'd take my rook there, and then I'd take the rook there, the king would take my rook. So, you know, again, and then he'd be left with a bishop, so he would be left with, well, I guess no, not exactly. Then we'd kind of be left in this, you know, deadlock still. But anyway, I'm still aiming for that square right there. So then, and this is actually what the move that he made that kind of gave me an opportunity to pull ahead and win the game. So you see he moves his rook right there, which is going to be significant in just a moment here. So I move my knight there. I can't remember exactly what my reasoning was. I think I was trying to go here on the next move so I could put pressure on that that bishop. And then he tries to put pressure on my knight there. And then I believe this is where I saw that opening. Maybe not yet. Okay, so this is where I see this opening to trap this rook here. So, you know, I move my queen here where I have access to this pawn, And if I do that, I can kind of trap that rook, and that'll at least kind of take one piece, tie up one of his pieces to not be able to protect this square here that I'm aiming at. So then he moves his queen there, which again allows me the opportunity to take this pawn. So now you see his rook is trapped there. And then he doesn't have any more pieces other than that rook defending that weak point, that square that I'm aiming for. Probably the best thing that he could have done in this position, at least that I can see, would have been to move his queen back there so he has another piece protecting that position. But then, I mean, even that situation, I would have, if I had taken that square, he would have taken my rook with his queen, and then I could have taken his queen with my rook, and that would have traded, a queen for two rooks, which would probably, probably wouldn't have been the greatest trade for him at this point. So anyway, I trap his rook right there. He tries to put pressure on my queen, but then I can just easily take his other pawn while still keeping his rook trapped. And then at this point, he tries to reinforce his rook there. But I think what he didn't realize is I could take this square, and it wouldn't really matter because that rook's trapped. And so this rook obviously doesn't have access to that square either. And so that was kind of the mistake he made in that at that point in the game. And so then I finally am able to take this square that I had been aiming at for, several moves, several moves earlier. And at that point, there wasn't really anything he could do. He couldn't move this rook. He couldn't take this rook because he's trapped here. And at that point, it was just a matter of, he tries to threaten my queen there. But at that point, I'd pretty much already won. I, put him in check there. And the only place he could move was here, obviously. And then I win the game. So, again, this is just kind of a game that I was a game that I really enjoyed playing, and I felt that this was an opponent who was better than me and who had this very solid kind of opening strategy that I was able to kind of find a weakness in and get around. He had used his pawns to kind of block up the whole left point of the board, and I was able to successfully get my kind of three most powerful pieces, my queen and my two rooks, over to the right side of the board so I could aim at this weak square and eventually win the game.